Good evening. Welcome to everyone. For tonight's meeting, I'll ask the clerk to announce the meeting and call the roll.
Roll call: Kane. Here. Markley. Here. Walters. Here. Philbrook.
Here.
Walker. Here. Townsend.
Present.
McKiernan.
Here.
Mugia.
Here.
Maddox.
Here.
Holland.
Here. Thank you. This evening, the invocation is being given by Reverend Mike May of St. Luke's Lutheran Church. We invite you to stand for the invocation and to remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Almighty God, we ask you to pour out your Spirit upon us tonight, so that as we begin this meeting and carry it through, that you would actually make us the people we actually think we are, as gifted and well-suited to the task of servant leadership, that we might provide those kinds of gifts to this community and its citizens that they best need in order that we might function together to assist one another in our daily lives, to assist one another in improving the world and the city in which we live. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Reverend May. Appreciate your being here tonight. Tonight we have two distinct parts of our meeting. The first is planning and zoning, which will be handled first, and then afterwards our non-planning and zoning meeting. Before we begin, I'll ask the clerk if there are any revisions to tonight's agenda.
There are no revisions.
Thank you. I'll now ask the clerk to read the planning and zoning statement, followed by the items on the planning and zoning consent agenda.
We would like to welcome all present to this meeting of the Unified Government Commission. Members of the commission are Mayor Mark Holland, Commissioner Hal Walker at Large District 2, Commissioner Gail Townsend, District 1, is joining us via phone, Commissioner Brian McKiernan, District 2, Commissioner Ann Mugia, District 3, Commissioner Terrence Maddox, District 4, Commissioner Mike Kane, District 5, Commissioner Angela Markley, District 6, Commissioner Jim Walters, District 7, and Commissioner Jane Philbrook, District 8. As each petition is called this evening, all persons for or against will be given the opportunity to express their views. If this is the first time that a particular petition has been before this commission, the commission has three options. Number one, it can approve the recommendation of the Planning Commission with 6 votes. 2, it can override the Planning Commission's recommendation, but it would take 8 votes to override. And number 3, it can return the matter to the Planning Commission for further consideration together with the statement specifying the reasons for the referral back to the Planning Commission. The consent agenda is the first part of the planning and zoning agenda. Items on the consent agenda have received a unanimous vote of recommendation by the Planning Commission. Unless there is a request to set aside an item from the consent agenda by the applicant, a member of the public, the Unified Government Commission, or staff, then the Planning Commission's recommendation on all items on the consent agenda will be adopted by the Unified Government Commission at one time. I will read the list of agenda items on the consent agenda, and when I have completed the list, the mayor will ask if there are any requests to set aside items from the consent agenda. This is your time to stand up and request that an item be set aside if you do not agree with the Planning Commission's recommendation. If an item is set aside, the matter will be discussed and voted upon separately. All items not set aside will be approved with the Planning Commission's recommendation. We appreciate the attendance of those people here this evening, and we recognize the importance of each petition. We remind you that there are a number of items on the agenda, and we'd appreciate your efforts to make your remarks as concise as possible. We ask that anyone with a cell phone to please turn them off or switch to non-audio so you will not disturb the meeting. Once the petitioners make their presentation, anyone for or against will be allowed the maximum 5 minutes to state your views. As you come to the microphone, please state your name and address for the record. The mayor and commission are required to disclose contacts with proponents or opponents on any item on the planning and zoning agenda. I will ask if any of the commission wish to disclose any contact with proponents or opponents on any of the agenda items.
Mayor,
Yes, Commissioner Townsend.
thank you, and Commissioner. I wish to contact with an opponent, the special use that is not on the consent agenda. It is special use number 2015-6.
Okay, thank you. That will be noted.
Contact with both the proponents and opponents of special use permit 20156.
Thank you. Commissioner Kane.
The opponent of the one Hal just said.
Thank you. Commissioner Maddox.
I've had contact with a proponent of SP 2014-55.
Okay, thank you. All right. Let the record show those are all the disclosures at this time.
I will now read the items on the consent agenda. Special use permit application item number 1, SP 2014-55, William and Paula Johnson. Special use permit for the temporary use of a land to park 3 dump trucks at 1508 and 1510 North 7th Street, recommended for denial. Item 2, SP 2015-7, Paul J. Hyde with Rosedale Farmers Market. Renew of a special use permit for a farmers market at 4020 Rainbow Boulevard, recommended for approval for 5 years. Item 3, SP 2015-9, Chip Cochran, special use permit for the temporary use of land for a temporary trailer at 2605 West 43rd Avenue, recommended for approval for 2 years. Plan review application item 1, PR 2015-4, Chuck Cochran, preliminary and final plan review for a new school, Frank Rushton, at 2605 West 43rd Avenue, recommended for approval. Miscellaneous ordinances, item 1, is an ordinance relating to the Environs Review, Chapter 27, Planning and Development, amending Section 27 through 152 of the 2008 Code of Ordinances and Resolutions of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. Item 2, an ordinance rezoning property at 4300 Leavenworth Road from R1B Single Family and C1 Limited District Business District to CP2 Planned General Businesses District. Item number 3, an ordinance rezoning property at 9910 French Family District from AG Agriculture R1 Single Family and CP2 Planned General Business District to CP2 Planned General Business District. And item 4 in this ordinance, as listed in the agenda with the legal description for the location at approximately 1929 Village West Parkway, Kansas City, Kansas. Those are all items on the consent agenda.
All right. Does any member of the commission or anyone in attendance tonight wish to set aside any item on the planning and zoning consent agenda? If an item is not set aside, it will be voted on by a single vote following the recommendation given by the Planning Commission.
I would like to set aside A1.
A1 will be set aside. Thank you. Anyone else like to set an item aside on the consent agenda?
Move for approval for all remaining items.
Let the record show no one else is moving forward to set an item aside. It is properly moved and seconded. Roll call.
Roll call, Kane.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Maddox.
Aye.
The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. That brings us to item A1 that was set aside. William and Paula Johnson requesting a special use permit to park 3 dump trucks. Ma'am, if you'd state your name and address for the record.
My name is Carmen Shaw, and I'm speaking on behalf of Paula Johnson. on behalf of the Johnson Truck Company, I would like for it to be removed.
It's been removed, and now we're ready to consider it. Would you like to speak to why you would like, what you would like to see happen?
I'm speaking on behalf, so Paula Johnson, someone's going to come and speak on her behalf as well.
Okay.
Okay.
And Mayor, at the Planning Commission, Ms. Johnson presented a petition that's being distributed to you right now.
Good evening. My name is Paula Johnson. I reside at 1510 North 17th Street. My husband and I, who can't attend any meetings because he's a diabetic, he has very bad incontinence problems right now, and they're working on that. So, but the agenda, I'm here before you this evening to ask that you please approve this permit to allow these dump trucks to be parked on the lot of 1508 North 17th Street. There is 2 trucks there instead of 3. William has one at the shop trying to sell it. If we have 2 years permit, we would like to find a place if they can't stay on the property, which these trucks have reside at this property at 1508 North 17th Street since 1980, when they were first purchased, and the land was purchased ahead of that, which was first gravel and dirt, and the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department said it couldn't park on gravel and dirt. It had to be an asphalted lot, which was turned into asphalt. William had tractor trailers ahead of that. Never had a problem. And then we had a call from code enforcement, and the police department said the trucks could no longer be there just in 2009. The only problem was told that the lot had to be asphalted in 1982. There was no code enforcement. Our trucks have sit in this lot since then. Had I known at the time we had bought this property, he would have brought somewhere else that he could have parked his trucks and had an eye on them. I'm asking that maybe something could be done to the lot that would help approve this, maybe a shed or a tall fence, something that would shield the trucks from the Oakland side if that's the problem. I understand it's a zoning issue, but if you walked out of our driveway and tried to go across to Oakland, it is literally 25 steps to which a business is there, the doctor's office. We have spoke with the doctors in this office, and none of them have a problem with these trucks. I have also spoke with the neighbors and have signatures and addresses and phone numbers. None of the neighbors have an issue with the trucks also. William was told today by a gentleman that came to see how he was doing that he had gotten a citation from code enforcement, and the man told him to come to City Hall and ask for a permit, which when he got to City Hall, he said he asked to speak with the gentleman that was in charge, and he said that if he paid $350, which we also did, that he could stamp his paper and take it back to the code enforcement, and he would get a 2-year permit. I'm wondering why the same thing wasn't done for us. Mr. Richards said we had a 6 months permit, which we hired an attorney, and the attorney said he spoke with the mayor, and he said it was okay for the trucks to be parked on our property. So I'm really kind of confused as to what should we do here.
Okay. I'd like to open up the public hearing if there's anyone else who would like to speak in favor, and then I'm going to come to our staff after that. Is there anyone else that would like to come and speak in favor of this proposal of having the dump trucks located here? I see no one moving forward. Would anyone like to speak in opposition to these dump trucks being located here? I see no one coming forward. So I'll close the public hearing at this point, and we'll ask Mr. Richardson to make comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This case has a rather long history, which is explained, at least a zoning history, explained on page 4 of your staff report. In September of 2010, the same request was made, and it was denied by this body. Even after the denial, the trucks remained there, and through code enforcement action, this case came before you. The Planning Commission recommended denial of this case 7-0. Mrs. Johnson mentioned another party that mentioned being able to pay $350 and get a permit. That's just to start the process. That's not to actually get the permit. And that's the special use permit fee for this type of use. But it's not a pay and get the permit. It's a pay to enter the process to get the special use permit. I'd stand for any questions.
Okay, Commissioner Maddox.
Thank you. I also got a call from Mrs. Johnson in representation of William Johnson, and I went to the actual location to see for myself. And where they're sitting, I don't know if you could zoom in closer. I couldn't even see the vehicles until I went closer to the front of the property. So the vehicles are really not seen from the front side of the property at all. And if they're not driven often, and they're just sitting there, I don't know if planning and zoning has an actual statute or something that they offer to citizens, whether it be special use or something. I mean, I don't see a problem with it, but I don't know who complained in the first place about the trucks. I'm just kind of going off what I was told.
Commissioner, I don't know where the complaint originated either, but the trucks, it's my understanding, go out in the morning, early in the morning with construction duties to perform for the day and come back in the afternoon. And the issue is that the zoning code and residential zoning doesn't allow trucks of this gross vehicle weight to be parked in residential zoning, so that's the zoning code issue. And the special use permit that's before you is the vehicle by which they could have that, I don't know what you call it, relief from that particular zoning code. So this process is how you, if you wanted to let them keep the dump trucks, then it would be to approve this special use permit for a period of time.
Oh, so I guess my other question is, why was it denied? On what premises or what?
Well, it's not a, I believe that the Planning Commission felt that it wasn't a proper use in a residential area.
And that was in 2010?
And most recently with the Planning Commission vote earlier this month. And in 2010, there was public opposition. There isn't public opposition at this time.
Commissioner McKiernan.
So as I read back through the staff history here, it says that there was a 6-month special use permit granted in October of 2008 and again in August of 2009. Each time that special use permit was granted to give time to find a more appropriate place for the vehicles. Am I correct in interpreting that?
That is correct.
What obstacles prevented the relocation of the vehicles in 2008 and 2009?
In 2009 is when they said I had 6 months to find a place to park the trucks. We checked everywhere, 7-Eleven, Quick Trip, different places that host trucks, and no one had a spot available then. So that's when he hired an attorney to see what he could do to get the 2 years. And that's when the attorney said it was approved, that he talked to the mayor. We had an attorney, Kevin Kavanaugh, he said it was approved.
Okay, so you hired the attorney in 2009?
Yes, I didn't do it this is only my second time this year. Well, it started last year, and I have a blood disorder. I was in the hospital. I had to do chemo for several rounds, and I was sick. So that's why it's been on the agenda for so long, because I wasn't able to come from 2014 till now.
I'm still going back to 2009.
But-
And again, it says here, the special use permit was denied in September of 2010. I would assume after the 2 6-month special use permits had both expired and the commission declined to renew them. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It was never 2 times back then. It was 1 time.
It has 2 separate case numbers, though, 2008-18 and 2009-35.
That's correct, Commissioner.
So there were 2 6-month special use permits granted,
Correct.
1 granted after the first one expired, both with the express intent of finding a place to put those trucks before the 6 months elapsed.
Correct. And they had difficulty doing that and finding another place that was secure. There are places that are not secure where they were afraid the trucks would be vandalized, I believe is the testimony.
How secure is the current parking location?
Well, it's adjacent to their house, so they can watch it, but it's not secured in any way.
Okay, thank you.
And again, this is only my 2nd time with a special use permit. I don't know where they got that this would be the 3rd time, because it was 2009 and
Okay.
just last year. It wasn't twice.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments from the commission?
Mayor, I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Townsend. I'm sorry, Commissioner, you're cutting out on us.
I'm sorry. What district, if you could tell me?
Commissioner, are you on, there's a question from Tech, if you were on speakerphone.
Hello?
Yes, there's a question that if
Is
you...
that better?
Yes, that's a little bit better.
Okay, thank you. This location is in what district?
It is in zoning district R-2, residential 2-family.
Oh, whose commission district is it? Commission district, is it in 4?
Is this 1 or 4, or what is this?
It's in Commission District 4, Commissioner Maddox's
Okay.
district.
Okay, thank you. The question that I have seems to parallel what I think Commissioner McKiernan was getting at. I was under the impression from reading the previous action history that the last time a special use permit was denied was back in 2010. So I'm not understanding what's happened since that time for the owners to find a new safe location, and if this permit is granted, how that would be different if this has been going on since 2010.
Okay,
Well, just a minute. I think, let me check and see if I think that's a rhetorical question, unless, Commissioner, you would like to hear from the applicant.
Yes, no, that's fine.
Okay, go ahead, ma'am.
okay. With the 2-year permit now, he already has 1 truck up for sale, and with his health, he will no longer be able to do the company. So his thing is he could probably get rid of all the trucks within the next 2 years. And the gentleman that came before us in 2009 often went to a lodge that is around the corner from our home. He wanted to buy one of the trucks, and when he told him it wasn't for sale, that's what started the process. And before then, it wasn't an issue. It was the gentleman that had a problem because he wouldn't sell him one of the trucks. He came up and sent the code enforcement folks out to talk about the trucks being in the neighborhood. Like I said, no one in the neighborhood has a problem, not even the people in the doctor's offices or the gas station and the place around the corner, the funeral home. Nobody else has an issue.
Okay, Commissioner Maddox.
Thank you. This is for Mr. Richardson. I just wanted to know, when did the complaint come forward about the truck leaving, and I guess in the wee hours of the morning? And
Well, the original complaints were, I believe, in 2000, late 2007 or early 2008, and then most recently in the January, February timeframe of 2014.
so in 2014, you had a complaint about the trucks being driven?
Well,
In-
code enforcement must have visited them, and they came to us after code enforcement visited them. The complaints generally don't come to me directly. They come through code enforcement, and then when code enforcement gives someone a notice of violation, then they come see me.
Okay, and then I wanted to ask Ms. Johnson, how often are those trucks driven? And it's not 3 anymore, you're saying there's 2 there?
There's 2 there,
And-
and the trucks might go out. This week it went out one time the whole week. Last week they went out 2 days. So it's not all 5 days. It's once a week, twice a week. Very seldom they get 5 days a week.
Okay, and I wanted to know, what does it take to possibly create an option for an extension of maybe a 6-month special permit without any other, you know what I'm saying?
Right. So
Reoccurrences.
the way this is presented to the Board of Commissioners tonight, it's recommended for denial by the Planning Commission. This is the first time it's been before you, so you could send it back to the Planning Commission with direction to consider a short-term time frame for approval, or you could change the recommendation this evening with 8 votes, or you could approve the recommendation for denial with 6 votes.
Okay, and this is my concern for Mrs. Johnson. When I spoke to her on the phone probably 4 days ago, she explained to me she just needs a little more time. I don't know about 2 years. I don't know if every commissioner is willing to make that kind of decision, but if maybe a 6-month term frame for them to be able to remove the trucks, get them sold, whatever takes place, I'm fine with that. And so, I mean, I make a motion to send it back to the Planning Commission with the option to possibly for a 6-month special permit.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to send it back. Comment. I'll make a comment. I mean, I'm sympathetic, obviously, about the small business efforts. I think the issue is, it was 5 years ago that this was denied, and I think it's a wrong precedent that someone ignores the commission vote that says, no, we don't approve it, and then 0 action is taken for 5 years. I think that precedent, that if we're not going to make any action, if our action of saying no, this doesn't count, or we have a code violation, and we say no to a code violation, and 5 years passes, and the law is completely ignored, and whatever efforts were made didn't happen. I mean, 6 more months isn't going to happen. There were 2 special use permits for 6 months. There was 5 years that have passed when the Planning Commission said no, the Commission said no, the Planning Commission has said no again. I don't think there's anything else to talk about except that the answer is no. And so I don't support sending it back to Planning and Zoning. I think it's been vetted thoroughly over the last 6 years. And 5 years ago, this commission said no, and the property owner has refused to abide by that decision, which was a legally binding decision, and they ignored it. And I think the message that we send to our community is, you can apply for a special use permit, but if we say no, you get 5 more years plus 6 months, and then you don't ever have to do it. And I think that's the absolute wrong message for our community. I think that you've had 6 years to move these trucks. You've decided not to move these trucks or not been able to move these trucks. And I don't think another 6 days, 6 months, 6 years is going to fix it. So I think the answer is no, and I don't think we need to send it anywhere. I think we just need to vote no and move on. And then we need to have some action taken to move these trucks off the property if the owner will not remove them. I think that it's time, after 5 years, we need to abate the situation and get the trucks moved because the owners have refused to abide by the law. And so that's the part that's frustrating to me. When you shirk the law for 5 years, all the other people in our community apply for a special use permit in good faith. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. People are upset. We get a lot of emotion in this room. But when the law is set, to ignore the law for 5 years, I think is a disrespect to this body and a disrespect to the citizens who have set these codes up in order to have our community work in a certain way. So I disagree with sending it back, and I think the trucks need to be moved, and we need to take abating action to move them off the property if the owner won't do it. So,
Mayor?
Yes, Commissioner Townsend.
I have a point of a question for clarification. I understood that this item was actually removed, was the word that I wrote down, or was it set aside? And my question is, if it was removed, do we need to take any action at all as a body?
No, I appreciate that. It was set aside off of the consent agenda for evaluation tonight by this body. So
Thank
yes,
you.
we do need to take action. So
Thank
we have
you.
a motion and a second on the table. I see no further comment. Roll call.
Roll call, Kane. No. Markley.
No.
Walters. Philbrook.
No.
Walker.
No.
Townsend.
No.
McKiernan.
No.
Mugia.
No.
Maddox.
Yes. Aye.
Aye. The motion fails 7-1.
All right, that motion fails. Is there another motion?
8-1, sorry.
Ma'am, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, ma'am. The public hearing is closed. Because the public hearing is over.
Move to accept the motion that was the direction of the Planning and Zoning Committee.
Second.
All right, it has been moved to accept the planning and zoning recommendation, which is for denial. A vote of yes is to uphold the planning and zoning recommendation. Seeing no further comment, roll call.
Roll call, Kane. Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Maddox.
Aye.
The vote is 8-0. That motion passed.
9-0.
9-0, sorry.
All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Commissioner Walker.
based on your statements, I'm assuming that the administration now, through Mr. Richardson and code enforcement, will take whatever is the appropriate action? Or codes, whoever.
What we will do is our general practice is to notify code enforcement that the case was denied, and they will move forward with the court proceedings that are pending. So when she applied for the special use permit, the court proceedings were put in abeyance until this process was concluded, and we will move forward with the court proceedings.
Okay, thank you. All right. We now brings us to planning and zoning non-consent. There's a single item on the planning and zoning non-consent. It is a special use permit for the temporary use to park a tow truck in a driveway at 4708 Kimball. Recommended for approval for 1 year on a 6-1 vote. I will open this for a public hearing and ask if the applicant is here, if the applicant would like to step forward and state your reason for application.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the commission. My name is Nicholas Porto. I'm an attorney in Kansas City, Missouri. My address is 1600 Baltimore, Suite 200A, Kansas City, Missouri 64108. I am here this evening on behalf of the applicant, Ty Johnson, as well as his employer, Midwest Tow Service. Mr. Johnson is here today to request a limited special use permit to park a flatbed-type tow vehicle at his residence at 4708 Kimball Avenue. The special use permit would allow him to park that tow vehicle only on Monday and Wednesday nights from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. and every other weekend. The reason for the application is that as part of his job description for Midwest Tow, Mr. Johnson is required to respond to certain law enforcement type tow requests from certain tow rotations for the Kansas Highway Patrol and the Kansas Turnpike Authority. The way a tow rotation works, for those of you who might be unfamiliar, is several law enforcement agencies in the area rely upon participating tow companies to respond to certain serious type tow calls. When a tow is summoned by one of these law enforcement agencies, tow companies are required to respond as quickly as possible. For his employment, Mr. Johnson works for Midwest Tow, and his shift is on Monday and Wednesday evenings from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. and every other weekend. Because of the time constraints on Mr. Johnson in order to respond to this call, it is necessary for Mr. Johnson to bring his flatbed-type tow truck to his residence in order to respond within 20 minutes. At no time other than Monday and Wednesday nights from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. and every other weekend will the truck be parked in the driveway. During those times, Mr. Johnson will not be driving a recreational vehicle at the same time, and he is not permitted to drive his tow truck for his own purpose, meaning when he takes his tow truck home at night or on the every other weekend, it will stay there with him at all times. Therefore, we do not believe an issue that was addressed was safety concerns raised by the neighbors, including the ability of children to play on or around the vehicle. Because Mr. Johnson will be with the vehicle 24 hours, 24/7 while he is there, we do not believe that to be an issue. Also, at no time will the tow truck ever be loaded with another vehicle. In other words, it will be empty the entire time it is there. We appeared before the Planning Commission where approval was recommended on a 6-to-1 basis, and Mr. Johnson was also agreeable to never activating his emergency lights in his driveway or on the street, and to never allow the vehicle to idle, to address any concerns the neighborhood might have. I will also note that even though the recommended approval was for 1 year, Mr. Johnson intends to leave his residence in November of 2015. Therefore, if a shorter period to allow Mr. Johnson only to use this special use permit for the duration of his lease, that would be acceptable too. Thank you.
Okay. I'll now open up the discussion. If there's anyone here who would like to speak in favor of the applicant. Let the record show I see no one moving forward. If there's anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this application, you may come forward at this time.
Mr. Mayor, Mrs. Rupp has several exhibits she would like to show to you, and Ms. Parker is passing those down the line at this point in time.
Okay.
Just a copy of the codes of the city. I'll give the people, can I give them a chance to look at this? Mayor, please, could I give them a chance to each look at this and read it?
No, go ahead. We get materials all the time that we look at while the message is going on.
Okay. I did want to bring that. This is so important. You know, I've been to so many meetings up here, and I've heard you guys talk about comparisons to Lenexa and how they do everything so perfect, comparisons to Johnson County. You know, and this is just one reason why we need to work even harder when it comes to code enforcement. This is why we're having so many problems, is because we're breaking the deal here and letting code violators come in, okay? When we first spotted this vehicle there on Kimball, my husband saw the tow truck flatbed rollover parked in the driveway, and he also saw a vehicle parked on the lawn, on the grass. So I sent Officer McCurley up there with the code violation that you're still looking at, that you're all looking at here, to give this to the gentleman and let him know that it is not allowed in a residential area. And he did do that, and he told him to remove the vehicle. That was at 9:46 a.m. on a Thursday morning I have that time right here. At 9:46 a.m. on July 1, okay, that he gave him that material. He showed back up at 1:09 p.m. with the vehicle, okay. So a couple of days later, Officer McIntosh went up there, and Officer McIntosh told him, I have read the law, I know what the law is, and it's against the law to have that vehicle in a residential area. And so he said, if I see it here again, I'm going to issue a ticket. During that time, he came up and got a special use permit. But before he even got approved, he was driving that vehicle all the time through the neighborhood, all the time, day, night, all the days that he did not mention. Okay, and I even mentioned to one of the commissioners, I said, "What, is this right to do this? Or, why is he doing this when it hasn't even gone to planning and zoning yet?" Okay, so now we've gone through planning and zoning, and that's why I'm showing you the codes here, is because we really need to stick to the laws in our county. Us neighborhood watch leaders and our groups are working so hard to clean up our neighborhoods, to make it, these are our safe havens. These are where we come home from all the industrial and commercial going on. This is where we want to lay back and relax, let our kids go out and play safely in the neighborhoods, not have to worry about big vehicles. I called my code enforcement person and I asked him about the vehicles, what was the reason? He said, it is for the safety of the children also. Not only is it an eyesore, it's an industrial vehicle, but it's for the safety of our children. The children love to climb. They have young legs. They like to get up on these things and climb, or go underneath them, play hide and seek. Somebody comes out, starts a truck, and we have a fatality. We have a steep hill on Kimball. We just had an accident, a fatality, of a woman saying she came up on a hill and there were kids out there and she ran over and one was a fatality. I mean, these are the this is why this is a code violation. We have nothing against this gentleman living there. I mean, I think that's wonderful. He wants to live there for the rest of his life. I think that's wonderful. But we have something against the truck. And it says no tow trucks. That doesn't just mean flatbeds. That says no tow trucks at all. So I'm just saying, and he says he's an emergency worker, and he has to.
Ma'am, you have 1 minute.
Okay, could I ask for a little bit longer from the commission and the mayor?
All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Okay, you have 5 more minutes.
So I would just like to say my husband works for BPU. He did for 27 years. He retired from there. He's an emergency worker. He got called out at 1 and 3 o'clock in the morning. He doesn't have his truck there. He didn't have the bucket truck there. He had to get in his regular truck, get dressed, just like this guy, get in his regular truck. All the BPU guys do, all the gas service company, they have to go to the location. They have to then get in their truck, and then they have to go work for $13,041.60 to light up this county of hospitals and daycares and people that have wheelchairs that need to be charged up, people on breathing machines. So those are emergency workers. If they can do it, he can do it. And I understand that he's got to be somewhere at a certain time. I don't know how long it takes the gentleman to get dressed, and it's really none of my business, but I can get dressed in 5 minutes and be at a meeting out at Lone Star, okay, out west, in 15 minutes. That's 20 minutes. So, and that's taking parallel and State Avenue straight. I'm sure we've got enough highways and things like that would accommodate him. We just can't let down on the codes in this city. You're setting a precedence is what you're doing. If you let one do it, then you're gonna have to let more and more. And I'm talking on this microphone, so a lot of people from Wyandotte County are listening to this. And pretty soon we're gonna have every tow truck driver, every dump truck driver, why don't we just bring in the Duffenbaum trucks? Why don't we let them park them in our neighborhoods, or Nebraska Furniture Mart, or UPS, or the concrete trucks? There's a lot of men that drive and women drive trucks for a living. Just think what our neighborhood would look like if they all brought their trucks home, and how unsafe it would be for our children. We couldn't even back out of our driveway. We couldn't see the road. So you know, we have nothing against the man, you know, being there. He can live there forever, but I do against his truck. He does have a Jeep. He's welcome, you know, I mean, he's welcome to stay there forever. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition?
I'm Ernestine. Okay, thank you. I'm Ernestine B. Smith. I live at 2727 North 46th Street. I'm the secretary of the 46ers Neighborhood Watch Group and former secretary of the Kansas City, Kansas branch NAACP. I'm against approving the truck traveling or being parked in the driveway on Kimball because the street is too narrow. I've traveled that street this afternoon, and 2 cars were close together on that street. So I'm against approving it.
Thank you. All right, does anyone else like to speak in opposition? Let the record show no one else is coming forward. I'll now close the public hearing portion of this. I would give the applicant an opportunity to respond to the comments that have been made if you would like to. You do not need to, but you're welcome to. Okay. All right, I'll open it up now to the commission. Commissioner McKiernan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as I go back and look at some of the previous discussion about this that occurred in Planning Commission, it says here pretty much all tow truck drivers take their response vehicles home. Is that true that that happens in Kansas City, Kansas? And if so, how many other code violations do we have out there?
A lot. Yes, and a lot. I mean, there are, we get these on a regular basis. I believe in the staff report, there's, well, there are probably 10 or 12 special use permits out for tow trucks in various places. This one's a little different because the nature of the road. This road is 16 feet wide, and it's not, you know, some of them are on different roads that are more conducive to tow truck driving. But there are others out there, and there are others that I drive by that I think are probably in violation, but they haven't been turned in.
And we're going to pursue those, right?
Well, code enforcement pursues those on a complaint basis.
Okay. So another question that I have, and this is really just kind of a more fundamental question in regards to your employer. How can an employer reasonably expect, knowing that the code ordinances that exist in this city and other cities, for any employee to be able to meet their response times when that constricts the area in which that employee can live based on the codes?
I do not know.
What allowance does the employer make in terms of requiring you to respond within X amount of time, but then requiring you to live in a house that's in a residential neighborhood that doesn't allow your truck?
Commissioner, it's not the employer that sets that. It's our police department, the Kansas Highway Patrol, that set those response times.
Oh.
Because in many instances on the interstate, they are trying to get the traffic cleared so that other traffic can proceed, and so they make that part of their response contract.
Okay, and so then that is something that you knew about in terms of response times when you chose that house at that location. Okay. And then in your presentation earlier, you said, you mentioned something about maybe getting a short-term special use permit that would allow time for, or until November, that would allow time for relocation.
Correct.
Going to vacate the house in November.
Correct.
Okay, so that's different then, because here the minutes from Planning Commission say that you've investigated alternate locations to park the vehicle, and you found none that were acceptable.
I understand the question now. We did investigate alternatives immediately, and we were not able to locate one. Mr. Johnson, this is a rental house. His lease expires in November, and he does not intend to renew his lease in November. To my point about how it was originally recommended for approval for a year, but our point is we do not require a year. We require 7 months or whatever.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Kane.
Well, I was going one way, and I guess I'm lost in the street. What's it, we're 16 feet, what's a normal street?
Our typical standard is either 28 or 32 feet from back of curb to back of curb for a new subdivision street, depending on if it's a regular residential street or a residential collector.
How wide is this tow truck?
8 to 9, 8.5, 9 inch, 8.5 to 9 foot.
How wide's the
Road's plenty big to back.
If you're gonna, you gotta come.
Because the
I am sure that road is because it's your truck and you can back it in, and you truck drivers you're good at moving the vehicles around, there's no doubt. My concern is it's a 16-foot street. And you get another truck there like mine with big mirrors, you know, we're gonna knock each other's mirrors off.
I'll always stop, pull over, or I won't even go onto the street if I see somebody else coming.
I gotta gather my thoughts for a second.
Commissioner Walker.
You know, we just saw an individual that we gave 2 6-month special use permits. I don't like, I mean, it's a terrible idea to have a truck in a neighborhood. At the same time, the guy's telling us, before tonight, there was no requirements on him as to what time he had to be home with the truck or any other. Now we know he's supposed to be there 2 days and every other weekend. And that apparently, at least by November, if that's the operative date we want to use, they're going to be gone. Now, how is it fair that we gave Ms. Johnson 2 6-month permits and ignored her for 5 years and not consider the same limited special use permit here? I mean, it's as much our fault when we require our tow trucks to be on site in 20 minutes. Most tow operators do not have a place of business within a residential community, so you can't live near where you work. And as far as the comments about the Board of Public Utilities, that's true with some workers. There are plenty of workers that take trucks home and use them from home. And we pay for that as taxpayers. And I suppose the light's going out, there's no legal requirement that they be back on in 20 minutes. So I find it that we're being inconsistent not to let the company or the gentleman, whoever this permit is really benefiting, for a 6-month period and enforce the requirements. I mean, we're good at setting down these rules. If he's there on Tuesday, he's violated it and revoked the special use permit before November. I mean, we have options, but at the same time, then we need to change it. We need to have a cop. We'll keep a cop out on the scene until a tow truck operator can get from home to the tow place, get the truck warmed up, and get it out. And sometimes that's going to be more than an hour, hour and a half, and we're going to pay for that as taxpayers. And the Highway Patrol, they insist on 20 minutes. Now, you tell me how a person can get from any place in Kansas City, unless you live right in the neighborhood, and go to the tow site and get the tow truck out to the site of a wreck, which could be all the way out in Bonner Springs, in 20 minutes. That is an impossibility. So I just think we ought, I don't want to give them a year. It's 6 months about.
I think it's 8 months.
Is it 8 months now?
April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. It would be 8 months.
All right. I mean, I'm in favor of 8 months. I don't want to do a year because he doesn't need a year. He's saying he's not going to hold over. He's going to be out of there and the truck will be gone.
Okay. Do you want to make, are you making a motion?
I make that motion.
Is there a second?
Mayor?
It's been seconded, yes. Commissioner Townsend and then Commissioner Murguia.
Thank you. I believe this is in District 1. We talk a lot about trying to improve our communities. I know that District 1 and some of the other communities in the Northeast area have particular challenges with development. That's one way, trying to get development, new development in the area is one way to make the eastern part of the city look more like the more western part. But I think another big issue is, and another methodology we have to employ, is the enforcement of our current code system. I just don't think it's appropriate to have commercial vehicles in residential vicinities. The 20-minute time constraint, I think, as Commissioner Walker said, that just seems to me to be unreasonable, but the occupants of that neighborhood should not be the ones who bear the responsibility or the hardship for some arbitrary number that's been set by the authorities with the Kansas City Highway Patrol. I would welcome, as I guess Ms. Rupp said, the applicant remaining in his home and in the 1st District, but I'm also aware that whatever his intentions are tonight to leave in November, for a variety of other reasons, he may decide to stay, and then where would we be with this situation? I would really not be in favor of granting the special use permit, but at most, I could see maybe 2 to 3 months to give him an opportunity to make other arrangements, but certainly not longer than that. And, you know, if we had to, I would recommend that be the time frame. I think anything longer is too long because basically we have a code violation here, and the long-standing residents of that community need to be honored and their property values appreciated. Thank you.
Administrator Bach, Commissioner, did you undo your light?
I undid it.
I just wanted to make clarification. When it comes to requirements that the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department or our Sheriff's Department or even that of the Kansas Highway Patrol puts on tow companies to response, our position is not one that we're thinking somebody has to have it at home. That's a requirement on that tow company that they may be 24/7 around the clock and how they could do it. There are tow companies that respond all times of the day. So because they choose to elect an operation where they will put their people at home and on call, is that called the tow company? So we put that out to them. It's their responsibility to determine the legal and correct way as to how they'll have their responders on duty to respond to any service call that we make.
Well, and to that point, I think there are a couple of issues here. One, I agree with Commissioner, I agree with everything that's been said. We have codes. I don't want commercial vehicles parked in our residential areas. I did vote for the 2 6-month extensions for the last one in 8 and 9, but then it didn't get honored. And so, but I do agree with Commissioner Walker that 8 months for this gentleman, because I think we have a larger issue in our city based on the staff report that this is happening everywhere, and some have special use permits and some don't. We have, I believe, 2 companies under contract with the Unified Government. Is that right, for towing? 3? One of them is Midwest Tow. And the towing contracts with cities are highly competitive. People want those contracts. I think we need to look at our contract and the contract language with all 3 of our tow companies that we contract with and say, we do not want, you are not allowed to require residency in terms of the tow truck being at someone's home in our neighborhoods. And I think we can go back to our own contracts and start to clean that up and put it back on the tow companies to say, stop forcing your drivers, who are good, hardworking men and women, stop forcing them to bring their trucks home in order to keep their jobs. That's not fair to them, and it's not fair to our neighbors. And I think we need to look at that requirement in our contracts, and I think that's a good place to start. We also, I think it would be worthwhile looking at, and this would be interesting, if a tow operator is requiring someone, I don't know if we can penalize the tow company and fine the tow company and say, if you're requiring someone to take it home without providing a provision for your response time, by requiring it to be in a residential neighborhood, I don't know if there's a way that we can penalize the tow companies for that, but I think we ought to look into that as well. I think the resolution of this case, I think this gentleman, Mr. Johnson, has been caught up in a situation. He's doing what everybody else is doing. This is not a good place for a tow truck. It's a residential neighborhood. The tow truck doesn't belong there. But I think we have a larger issue. So I would support the 8-month extension, but I would want us to take proactive action, particularly with the 3 companies that want our business, to say you cannot continue this practice because it's unacceptable. And I think that's a good place to create some leverage. All right, we have a motion and a second. It is a change from what is on here because the approval's from 1 year. To change it down to 8 months would require 8 votes. Is that correct? All right, so we have a motion and a second. It would require 8 votes in order to lower it to 8 months. Otherwise, we're back to the recommendation by the Planning and Zoning. So seeing no further comments, roll call.
Roll call, Kane. Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
No.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Maddox.
Aye.
The vote is 8-1. The motion carries.
All right, thank you. So that it has been approved for 8 months. All right, that concludes our planning and zoning portion of our meeting and brings us now to the non-planning and zoning consent agenda. And I will ask if anyone in attendance or anyone on the commission would like to set an item aside. Please do so now. Anything not set aside will be voted on with a single vote.
Move for approval.
Second.
Commissioner Maddox.
Is this the land bank?
No, not yet.
Okay.
All right. Let the record show no one's moving forward to set an item aside. It has been properly moved and seconded. Roll call.
Roll call, Kane.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Maddox.
Aye.
The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
All right. So that agenda is complete. We are now adjourned as the Board of Commissioners and re-adjourned as the Land Bank Board of Trustees. I would ask Mr. Slaughter to come forward at this time if there are any changes. Commissioner Markley?
Yeah, Mayor, I'm just noting that there's one on this list that I believe was actually recommended for denial, so I'm guessing that's just a typographical error. That would be the South 53rd Street, 2921 South 53rd. It's at the top of page 8-ish.
Say that again.
It's
at the top of page
29.
8.
It's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 down from the top. 2921 South 53rd Street. This was the one that was recommended for denial by the
Standing committee.
well, and by the neighborhood group, the other board as well.
The advisory board.
Committee.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes, that's a typo. That should not be on this list.
Thank you. That one will be removed.
And also, we're going to ask that 3530 North 35th Street be removed from the vote tonight. We received another application, and we're going to come back later with the best and final.
Okay, that one will be removed. Are there any others on the consent items that folks on item number 1 that people would like to remove?
Move for approval?
Yes.
Commissioner Maddox?
Yes, I would like to remove and look at 1700 North 7th Street, 1702 North 7th Street, and 1704 North 7th Street.
So the three at the top of page 8? Is that right? Okay, those will be removed. All right, also, on this consent agenda is also item number 2, which is the land bank policy. Mr. Bach, do you have comment?
I just want to clarify, and I don't think it needs to be removed, but the instructions within the document indicated that the administrator will assign staff to this. It was clarified, I think, during the committee that we would actually, one of those would be a member of NRC, so that was put into the document, and that's different from what went to standing committee.
So it's just a...
We just specified that a representative of my appointments will include NRC.
And that was an intention all along. It was a clerical error that it was not included initially.
Yes.
Okay. So with that clerical correction, we now have the remaining items before us, all except on the top of page 8, the first three, 1700, 1702, 1704 North 7th. 2921 was typographical and should not be included. It was already been denied by the standing committee. And then 3530 North 35th Street has been removed by request of the staff to look at a best and final because there's another option. Is that clear?
Move for approval for all remaining items?
Second.
It has been properly moved and seconded. Roll call.
Roll call. Kane. Aye. Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Maddox.
Aye.
The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
That brings us to the three items that were pulled off, 1700, 1702, and 1704 North 7th. Commissioner Maddox, would you like to make comment?
Yes, I just wanted to ask Mr. Slaughter, was the Douglas Sumner Neighborhood Association contacted about these three properties? I know that in this area, they currently have a partnership with the LISC organization for a Neighborhoods Now initiative, which they've been building homes along the 7th Street corridor. So my question is, one, has the Douglas Sumner Neighborhood Association been contacted in regards to these three properties? Because it's right in the area where they're building homes.
There had been previous conversations with the neighborhood group, and they were fine with the applications. Then basically, we came back at a later time, and we put the area on hold. And then basically, I contacted the church and said, we're going to just kind of hold off right there. Since then, and kind of part of the reason we put them on hold is they were in the process of obtaining additional property from a private owner. They have since obtained that property, and if you really, we don't have time to put a map up, but if you really looked at the map of the area, there is a small corner that is land bank, and that is these three properties. So I felt it only made sense that since they've already controlled the rest of the property, maybe it can be considered a good anchor tenant for the development of their neighborhood, and that's why I made the decision to bring it forward.
Right. So my question still is, have you contacted the neighborhood association or the president about this area, these three properties within the Neighborhoods Now initiative?
Not since the last conversations, no.
Which was when?
Probably fall of last year, maybe last summer.
Okay, well, I'd like to possibly hold off on those until until we can contact the neighborhood association and make sure that that is not a conflict with the Neighborhood Now initiative as they continue to move forward and build those homes.
Okay, so you would like to move to send this one back to the standing committee?
Yes, sir. Yeah, pending contact with the Douglas Sumner Neighborhood Association.
Are you making a motion?
Oh, yeah.
You want to hold it over to this group or to the standing committee? I'm open to either one. We could do it, we could just bring it back to this group at our next commission meeting. It's going to be the same result, right?
Yeah, it's to come right back to the commission.
Come back to the commission.
That's fine.
So we'll just send it back, and we're going to table it. We're going to table these three.
Table it to where?
To this group, for the commission to the commission, pending your conversation with the neighborhood group, and then at our next meeting, you can come back and
April 9th will
report
be
that
the
back.
next meeting, April 9th.
I mean, if you contact
April 9th.
within the next few days or early next week, we can have it on the next agenda.
Yeah, we can have it next week. So we can table it for 1 week till the April 9th, pending this conversation with the neighborhood group.
If that's what the board wants.
Okay. So is there a second? Second. All right, it's been moved and seconded to table these 3 land bank applications until next week, April 9th, and for the Mr. Slaughter to contact the neighborhood group. 2 weeks is what I meant.
I will already have items on that agenda anyway, so.
Okay.
It's not a problem.
Thank you for the clarification. So 2 weeks. Any further comment? Roll call.
Roll call. Kane. Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Maddox.
Aye.
The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
All right, that concludes our business tonight. We are adjourned.